everybody. Hi, everybody. We're talking about open relationships
Open
today.
relationships. I was just talking to somebody about the difference between open relationships and polyamory.
Yeah,
And the
that's a
way,
good place to start.
yeah, the way I explained it, and I said you have to, in the broadest terms, because it means different things to different people, is an open relationship is when two people in a partnership, in a relationship, decide that they can go outside of the partnership for sex. It is
Yeah,
basically sex-based.
yeah,
Um, And polyamory is the idea that you can be in love and you can share your love with more than one person at a time, and that
yeah,
you can have relationships either as a group or separately with other people, and that it doesn't take away from the main relationship. And that can be done in many different permutations, just depending on
yeah. And maybe even
people.
that there's not a main relationship.
Right.
Maybe, there's variations which kind of get into something called relationship anarchy, which is
Yeah.
a sidestep, which
Yeah.
is where all relationships are equal. That so there's not necessarily the understanding of a primary and secondary and tertiary. It's all relationships being of equal value, which is not everybody's cup of tea, but it's another version of it.
Yeah. And,
Mm.
it is something that you could try out with a partner and just see if it works for you, both of those things. And then you can
Mm.
go back to some people I know who have open relationships, will go through something with their partner where they'll close the relationship for a period of time, maybe
Hmm.
to work on some intimacy issues, or maybe they have something going on that has nothing to do with that in their lives. And
Mm.
then they decide to open it up again. But I'm getting ahead of
Yeah.
myself. So we got a question about wanting to know what you do when you are jealous in an open relationship, or in
Right.
any relationship, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you want to talk about that, or I can start? I can go with that one. I can start with that.
I can talk a little bit about it, and you can jump in.
Okay.
I think that jealousy in an open relationship is just like jealousy in just about any other sort of romantic relationship,
Yeah.
and it's normal to feel it. So don't
Yeah.
be ashamed to feel your jealousy, but it is
Yeah.
something that, if it's not brought up, can fester into a resentment. So
Yeah.
it's talking to your partner about it in a very gentle way in the beginning, and
Hmm.
just really taking ownership. I'm feeling jealous of this, and I know it's me, and this is something that's going on for me. I just want you to know about it. And then you talk about what your partner can do, maybe to make you feel a little bit better,
Hmm.
um, but also just taking ownership of your own jealousy.
Mm.
And
And I
yeah.
think something that I want to add is often when we start talking about non-monogamy and non-monogamies, because there's so many, whether you're swinging or whether you're a full-scale relationship anarchist or something in the middle, immediately the first question that comes up for a lot of people is, what about the jealousy? And to me, it's implied that the jealousy is an emotion that doesn't exist in any other context
Right.
in life except that.
Right.
And it's so not true. Jealousy is a human emotion. Jealousy is, like anger, like passion, like joy, like any other feeling. Jealousy exists. And I think, we tend to get very protective of ourselves around emotions that we perceive as complicated. So we
Mhm.
perceive jealousy as complicated, but we don't perceive happiness as complicated. But what they both have in common is they're both emotions.
Yeah. No,
How are
you're
you feeling?
absolutely
I'm
right.
happy. How are you feeling? I'm jealous. Jealousy comes with this weighted baggage of this is not allowed, this is not acceptable, this is uncomfortable, this is, fill in the blank. Whereas happiness is encouraged to the degree that it's almost pathological, that we have this expectation that we have to be happy all the time. And if we're
Right.
not happy all the time, then it's because of, something terrible that happened in our childhood, which the truth about emotions is that they're never permanent. They're always passing. And so whether you're in a monogamous relationship or an open relationship of some kind, you're going to feel jealous at different times. You're going to feel a lot of things at different times. And jealousy is just one of those feelings that comes up. And
Mhm.
even in monogamous relationships, your partner is probably going to have friends they want to hang out with, or hobbies or activities that take them away from you.
Mhm.
And then you might feel jealous, but it's not necessarily because your partner is having sex with another person,
Right.
but your partner is a human unto themselves who has interests and hobbies and desires and longings and feelings apart from you, which don't necessarily mean that they love you any less. And it's this level of complexity in human relationships that I think freaks a lot of people out. And yet, it's so normal. It's so common. If you're having a relationship with another human,
Mhm.
you're gonna have feels. It's just part of the territory.
Mhm.
So that's one of the pieces that I like to add in when people kind of immediately jump to how about the jealousy,
Mhm.
is to remember that jealousy is an emotion, and all emotions happen in relationships, and that's normal. And I mean, people who don't like having emotions, or who don't like, having any kind of
Expressing them, right.
processes around that,
Mhm.
maybe they struggle in relationships in general, whether open or
Mhm.
otherwise. But jealousy jealousy is just another emotion that is an invitation to extend yourself, which is what relationships are about, invitations to extend yourself.
And it can also, I found anecdotally that when I'm jealous, regardless if it's in a friendship or in a relationship, I look at that and I go, where is it in this relationship that feels insecure to me? And
Mm-hmm.
how can I attack that myself before so that I even have a clearer idea of why my feelings are hurt,
Yeah.
and what can be done in the relationship, if anything,
Yeah.
or if it's an old wound.
Right. And one here, Buck, is asking, what if you have a hard time telling your partner that you're jealous? And so that's a really important thing,
Yeah.
I think. What do we do when we recognize that the jealousy is there? Because that's part of the situation,
Yeah.
is taking ownership and going, oh, okay, what I'm feeling is jealousy. So
Mm-hmm.
here it is. And then so we've identified it. The next part is, how
Yeah.
do we say it? And so depending on how, what does it mean to us to be jealous? Because we'll put a meaning on a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Happiness is a feeling that has a meaning. Like happiness is good, happiness is positive, happiness is acceptable. That's the meaning we put on it.
Yeah.
We feel jealous. Does it mean to us that it's negative? Does it mean to us that we are a burden? Does it mean to us that we are, demanding or too much? Or does it mean that we're needy? And so when we can sort of start to see, well, what is it about jealousy that's hard for me to talk about? What is it about it that's hard for me to say? That we can start practicing recognizing that emotions in their essence are neutral and that they pass. And so if it's difficult to say to a partner, I'm feeling jealous, if you can admit it to yourself and start allowing yourself to recognize that you have multiple feelings, to then be able to be in the practice of saying, I'm feeling X because of ABC. And that little phrase is something I teach my clients all the time. I feel X because ABC. I feel jealous because you're spending a lot of time with so and so.
Mm-hmm. And you can even add an and onto that. I'm feeling
Mm-hmm.
jealous because you're spending time with Cyndi, and I know this is my stuff. Or,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we need to have a conversation about what we can do about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It gives you that active
Mm.
uh, amount
Yeah.
of, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, having a conversation about it is important. And then we sort of start stepping into, do we have the tools and the skills we need to start having that conversation? Not everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to recognize when we're within you know, it's one thing to say, oh, just communicate about it. If you don't know how to communicate, that's going to be a really hard conversation,
Yeah.
really, really hard. And so we've got to scale it back and break it down into tiny slices. And, you know, I say to my clients, you can't eat a whole cake in one sitting. You've got to cut it into slices. And so the first slice is, what am I feeling and why am I feeling it? And just allowing it to be there without rushing to try and change it or try and make it be something else. It just is what it is. And it's allowed to exist, even if it's uncomfortable. Discomfort's normal, and it's okay. And our job, our practice, is to just slow down long enough to go, okay, so this is what I'm feeling. So if you find it hard to say to your partner that you're jealous, recognize that it's okay to find it difficult. I find it difficult, and I've been doing this in various forms for years, you know, and it's always going to be difficult, but that's part of the territory.
And what if your partner doesn't want to hear it? I think Buck had asked.
Well, they don't want to hear that you're having an emotional response. Then, I mean, then I think you have a different problem,
Yeah.
you know, because if a partner doesn't want to have discussions about feelings, that's going to be hard to be in a relationship with them of any kind, open or otherwise, because if you can only talk about things, you know, rationally and talk about what you think rather than
What that
how you
person thinks
feel,
rationally.
yeah, it's going to be hard to have a relationship with somebody who says no feelings in this relationship. We don't do feelings in this relationship.
And I'm not available to hear your feelings because I can't handle it.
Yeah. That becomes to me, that would be a red flag about a relationship in general. If there's no feelings allowed, then I think we have a much bigger problem than, are we in an open relationship? It's like, what's happening with this relationship would be my thing there.
The next question actually sort of feeds into that, which is, how can I trust my partner? And then I added on, and myself.
Yeah. So, I mean, in what context?
I took it to mean, if we set up rules, how can I trust that my partner is going to hold that up and tell me the truth or adhere to those? And how can I, in the moment, you know, really, really adhere to the rules as well?
Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, it depends on how much trust is valued in the relationship, because, you know, not all relationships have the same sorts of values. And so if trust is not a value either of you hold necessarily and embody, because it's one thing to say, you know, to give lip service and say, yeah, I think trust is really important, but you don't embody it, you don't demonstrate it, you don't act on it, then it's kind of, what's the point, you know? So if you're a person who doesn't trust easily, then maybe you're definitely going to be challenged by something like this, perhaps more than a person who does feel trust more easily. So if you're inclined to feel anxious around these kinds of things, if you're inclined to want to, you know, to need a lot of reassurance, that's okay. But again, part of that is that self-awareness and knowing that, you know, I tend to experience anxiety around trust. I tend to find it really difficult to let go enough to let you go and do whatever this thing is that you want to do that I struggle with. I need you to know that this is something that goes on for me. I'm willing to address it. I'm willing to work on it. But I also need you to hear that that's something that I live with. And the dial is turned up to 11 when you're on a date with this person and I'm sitting at home, you know.
And is it fair to ask them to be sensitive to that? Is it fair to say you want a certain behavior from your partner in order to help you?
You can say it, but you might not get it.
Right.
Because you can't control what anybody else does. That's something to be negotiated. But yeah, you can say whatever you want. I mean, that's that. But expecting that another person is going to curb their behavior for you, again, is something to be negotiated. And you know, this is you know, non-monogamy is complicated in a different way than monogamy. They're both complicated because you're dealing with other people's thoughts, feelings, values, behaviors, actions. And so to be in a relationship at any level comes with a degree of compromise embedded in it. That's what relationships are, is a series of agreements going back and forth. So yeah, you can ask for whatever you want. And between you, hopefully, you'll come up with agreements, but there's not going to be a one size fits all that, you know, this is the best way to deal with trust issues. I've never seen it work like that. I think it really comes down to what two individuals are willing to offer and receive, and how often you sort of continue to meet in the middle, and then looking at each individual person's, you know, capacity to manage their feelings, to regulate themselves and not be spiraling out of control, because that's not necessarily something that the other person can manage for them. They have to learn to manage that themselves. But if the jealousy becomes so out of control, then maybe being in an open relationship, you're not suited to it, or you're not suited to it in this context, and then it would be a real renegotiation of agreements. So it's not as easy as, can I ask my partner to be sensitive to this? Well, yes, you can, of course you can, but you might not get what you want.
Right. There's an expectation that you might not get.
Yeah.
I think all of these questions we got are sort of variation on this theme. Like, how do I communicate important emotions that come up? I'm guessing that is asking for tools, like compliment sandwich, I would imagine. Or the thought of open relationships makes me feel insecure. How can I overcome it? So I feel like we've sort of touched on that already. Don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think if the folks who are listening, I mean, you can sort of ask more specific questions, but when it's very general, like, how do I communicate feelings? That's a really useful relationship skill, no matter what kind of relationship you're in, even if you're a parent, or you're a child trying to communicate with a parent. These things are valuable, whether you're co-workers, any of these kinds of relationships, these kinds of skills really help. And so communicating emotions, I think, the first thing is identifying what you're feeling, giving it a name. Because emotions can be overwhelming when you don't know what you're feeling. It just, maybe you've got the hot flush, you've got a racing heart, you've got tension, you've got your voice is up high. All of these things are indications that you're feeling something. And when you are in that state and you can't say what it is that you're feeling, that makes it difficult to communicate, because all that's happening is you're just having a somatic reaction, and you become, it becomes harder for you to say what it is. So a really handy practice, I think, is to take a look at the feelings wheel and identify, what am I feeling right now? And if you don't know what a feelings wheel is, you can Google it and you'll see it. It's a big multicolored kind of pie chart that has lots and lots of feelings in it. And on my website, I have a whole article about how to use it. But learning how to identify feelings, I think, is a really helpful first step in how do I communicate feelings. You identify the feeling, and then offering on the because, I'm feeling this because of that, and just use that simple formula. It's so handy, it's so reliable, it avoids judgment, it avoids blame, and it just says, it's cause and effect. I feel this because of that. And that is a practice in just allowing ourselves to be with the feeling, allowing the people around us to hear that that's what's going on. Nobody has to change anything. Nobody has to fix it. Nobody has to water themselves down. It's just a practice of being with. And that, I think, is a really helpful emotion regulation tool, is naming the feeling and naming the what's brought it on, the trigger, what's happened.
I think also another tool that can be used in expectation of having a hard time talking about our feelings is setting up a weekly check-in. If
Yeah.
you are, you know, so that you know it's coming and your partner knows it's coming, and so you're thinking about it, and so you have that weekly check-in and you talk about, these are the feelings that have been coming up for me. How about you?
Yeah.
And that way it's already there. You don't have to go, gosh, you know, I don't know about you, but I get anxious when someone says, I need to have a talk with you. You
Right.
know, I get super anxious.
Yeah. It's just it's impending doom.
Yes. Like, oh, what are you going to say? But if you have a weekly chat, then it's already there on the calendar. And
Yeah.
I would suggest that too for anyone in an open relationship, regardless of how hard it is or easy it is to express yourself, is to check
Yeah.
in and see what was hard and what wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm wondering if maybe we should talk about just basic contracts for an open relationship. Like, how do you
Mm-hmm.
start? Do you sit down and just say, what's off limits? Like, I don't want you kissing that person, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
you can give them a blowjob,
Mm-hmm.
you know, something like that.
Yeah.
And even just starting out slowly, here are 3 rules, or maybe it means more to you that you sit down with a yes, no, maybe list, which I would Google, and go through a whole list of things that you do want to do, that you don't want to do, and things you might want to do, and discuss it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it depends on the kind of open relationship that you're
Mhm.
having. Like if you're going to go to a party together and have, you know, sex, whatever, with other people, that's a different version of it than are you going to go on individual dates with people that you've met on dating sites and I'm not going to be around to monitor it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, deciding on the context, I think, I mean,
Yeah.
to me, that really matters.
Yeah.
And if it's going to be an open relationship that's sex only with no feelings,
Mhm.
how, you know, having that as a stipulation, or if it's going to be, you know, with emotional components to it, with our sleepovers allowed and that sort
Mhm.
of thing. And you know, and then sort of discussions around sexual health, I think, are going to be pretty important too,
Oh,
if that's going to be involved in it.
yeah.
And also the degree to which you're going to take into account the feelings of the other people. That it's
Yeah.
not just you and the partner, you know, it's you and the partner and the 3, 4, 5, however other people are involved in this. The degree to which those people get a say
Mhm.
in how things unfold. So I think, you know, to say, well, you can kiss this person, but you can't do oral on them. I mean, that's fine. You can say that if you want to. But we don't even know what that other person is thinking or feeling or what the parameters are. So it becomes very, very layered because the more people that are involved, the more people potentially maybe get to have a say in how things unfold,
Mhm.
depending on the model that you have. So I think before you even start going into contracts, you probably need to read some books about different non-monogamy styles and get a sense of the different models that different folks use,
Mhm.
and then talk to your primary partner if that's what you have, um, and say which model do we think is probably going to be best for us to start with. Or if you are a person getting involved with somebody who's already in a marriage or in a relationship and you are the new partner coming in, what are your expectations? What
Mhm.
are your hopes and fears? And do you feel validated if the person you're dating goes home to their spouse?
Mhm.
What's going to make you feel validated
Mhm.
in terms of being heard by the person you're dating? Are they going to necessarily privilege their spouse over you, and are you okay with that?
Yeah.
So these sorts of conversations are more in the realm of how I sort of think and experience these open relationship discussions. It's not just you and me against the world.
Mhm.
It's, you know, you, me, and all the other people that are orbiting around us, the degree to which we're taking their feelings into consideration too. And again, that makes things complicated. Um, but not so complicated that it's not doable. And I think that's where you really need to get information, reading books and,
Mhm.
attending online seminars and that sort of thing, I think is really helpful. But to try and do this without support, I think is very difficult
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because,
And I think,
our whole world is geared to privilege monogamy. And if you're at coloring outside the lines consensually, um, you're not going to see a lot of our own stories reflected back to us in the
mhm.
mainstream. We have to seek out communities outside of the mainstream to support us, to break down things like, primary couple privilege and these sorts of ideas, which if you're working in that model, that's fine, but not everybody does, and
Right.
to not assume that everybody will want to be
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah. And I think what you brought up too about doing some research and getting some books. There are books that I think we both recommend. There's Love's
Mm-hmm.
Not Colorblind by
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Patterson, Opening Up by Tristan Taormino, and
Mm-hmm.
of course, The Ethical Slut, which is the Bible, I think, of
Mm-hmm.
open
It was one of the
relationships.
first, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think there's more than two,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but yeah, those are some to those are people to follow and also to read.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, really good information.
Mm.
Does anyone have a question in these last couple of minutes? Because we've gone through ours.
I think the thing with open relationships and non-monogamies is it's very, very case specific. There are so many minefields that you can run into in relationships in general,
Mm-hmm.
and open relationships certainly turn the dial up on them insofar as that, emotional requirements become really amplified.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's I think there's a bit of a misconception that monogamy is easier or safer.
Oh.
It's easier insofar as everybody knows the rules and you don't have to do much in terms of, making a contract because the rules are written for you. But if you write your own rules, that's another book actually, just reminded me. Meg John Barker's got a book called Rewriting the Rules, which is fantastic. I really like that one too. To write your own rules for a relationship it requires a bit more input at the beginning and actually as you go through, but it means that you get to design the relationship on your terms. You get to bring more of yourself into the relationships. And for folks who want that, for folks who find traditional monogamy is stifling or they don't like it or it just doesn't quite fit, it's kind of like, a shoe that's a little bit too tight,
Mm-hmm.
to not feel like it's wrong to want to change the script. And the monogamy script is what we've been given, but it just doesn't suit everybody, and it suits some people beautifully and others it just doesn't. And it's if you're feeling called to expand yourself in terms of sex and relationships, this is something that happens often, that folks will start questioning, what might happen if we opened our relationship and how might we do it? What would that look like for us? So
Mm-hmm.
keeping the conversation flowing, remaining curious is always really helpful, I think.
Excellent. Thank you, Cyndi. You
Oh,
are
thank
again
you.
a fountain of knowledge. Um, always. Well, thanks everybody. And if you have an idea for a topic, slide into my DMs.
Yes.
I can't believe I just said that. I hate that term. But let us
Tell
know.
us what you want to talk about. Tell us the topics
Yeah,
that float your boat, because
that float your boat. Yeah.
we could
So,
talk about all kinds of things.
oh yes. All right, maybe, yeah, I've got an idea actually that it'd be very interesting. But still, send us stuff.
Absolutely. And I can see your, I was going to say, I can see your bosoms. I can see the bosoms over your shoulder.
Oh yes, these. Cyndi
Yes.
gave these to me for
They're
my
your
birthday. They're
birthday bosoms.
birthday bosoms, they're one of my favorite things in the world. And
I love them.
I love that they're in everything now that I do on Zoom or whatever. So anyway, I love my
birthday
boobs.
bosoms.
I love my boobs.
Nice.
All right, my love. We'll see you guys later.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, everybody. And we'll see you next Friday. All right. Bye.